All right. Well, Isabella, thank you so much for partnering with me to discuss new racism. When I read the article, Why Saying I Don't See Race at All Just Makes Racism Worse by Heather McGee, she talked about growing up in the 1980s and being taught that the way to be a good person was to swear that race didn't matter, at least not anymore. That really hit home for me because I also grew up in the 80s watching shows like Different Strokes and The Facts of Life. And I really believed also that if you are a good person, you treat everyone the same and you do not see race.
Yeah, I've definitely heard the saying, I don't see color too. It's supposed to be a good thing, respectfully.
Totally. In my family, we were taught that not seeing color was respectful, but the article says that color blindness is a form of racial denial and that many well-meaning people have embraced it. But when put into practice, it's still a racist world, and the result is more racism.
Honestly, it made me uncomfortable, but kind of in a good way, because it's true. You ignore it, and it doesn't disappear.
Yeah, I agree. New racism seems a lot more subtle, which makes it easier for people to deny it still exists. When people say racism is over, they're basically using the color blindness argument.
Exactly. Racism becomes invisible, even though its outcome still remains.
So I'm curious, you're younger than me from the early 2000s, right? What
Yes.
movies or shows did you watch up growing up that sent the message that race doesn't matter?
So I was a huge fan of Disney princesses, especially all of the movies.
Uh-huh. And they didn't really talk about race. They just showed one version of what a princess looked like.
Yeah, you're totally right, actually. In fact, they casted a black princess in the new live action of Little Mermaid. I'm not sure if you've seen it before. And the reaction was quite huge and a bit controversial.
Hmm.
Many individuals say race doesn't matter until that representation is actually included.
Huh. For something that shouldn't matter, it seems like it suddenly mattered a lot. That really reflects the whole zero sum thinking, where representation feels like something is being taken away, even though it's just expanding on inclusion.
Yeah.
Well, another part of the article that really stood out to me is when it says that if people stop believing racism is a factor, they still notice inequality, but they start coming up with other reasons for it.
Yeah, it's kind of like blaming the people instead of the actual social systems that benefits white people the most.
Exactly. For example, if there's a gap in wealth or education, some people say, well, they just need to work harder for it instead of considering discrimination or unequal access. Why do you think people blame individuals rather than unfair social and economic systems?
I think it's an issue of comfort zone. It's really
Hmm.
easy to blame others than to admit the system is unfair and that some people benefit, more from it. In
Mm.
kinesiology, we talk about how patients aren't always treated all the same.
Mm.
For example, some people's pain is believed and others isn't. Some people are also labeled, difficult, and
Mm.
some are easy. So when the author talks about colorblindness being not seeing the system, it really clicked for me.
Huh. Right. So you can't fix what you refuse to see.
Exactly. I want to be a children's physiotherapist. I'm not sure if you remember. So
Mm.
if you need to pay attention to everything in their lives, so sorry, my mom keeps calling. Um, like what their family can afford, whether your parents can take time off of work or appointments, and if adults have taken them seriously before, saying I treat everyone the same might sound good, but it can mean I'm ignoring what some kids and their families are really facing.
That is such a good example of what the article is saying. Treating everyone the same is actually unfair because everyone is starting from a different starting place.
Yeah.
So, what I struggle with the most is understanding why the zero sum belief still exists.
Yeah, it's like kind of become a competition mindset.
Exactly. And that's what confuses me. Why does equality feel like a threat? If things were fair, nobody should feel like they're losing.
I think it's because advantaged people feel like something is being taken away, when in reality, it's just leveling out the playing field.
I really think that's a clear way of explaining it. People often confuse fairness with being punished.
A great example of zero-sum thinking is when there's extra support for minority students, for example. And some
Hmm.
people say, what about me? This belief holds that help is limited and that some also are getting it. It means that you lose.
Yeah. That zero-sum thinking also ties into the idea of meritocracy that the author discusses.
Yeah, totally. I don't know if you remember, but I love ballet. Ballet is a great example of this. It looks like a meritocracy. There's hard work, being disciplined, and earning your spot in that sport.
Mhm.
But we both know it's not actually that simple. You look at who can afford lessons, who has transportation, and who has parents with time and money, and the
Right.
default body type and aesthetic that has been very narrow for a long time.
Wow, that is such a great example. So if someone says, I don't see race, it's just talent, they're ignoring the barriers that keep some people out.
Exactly. It's not that people aren't necessarily talented, it's that the system rewards a certain people more easily.
I agree. The article also gave examples of how racism appears in job searches. So, for instance, Black job applicants have a way better chance of getting an interview if they remove any mention of race from the resume or if their name even sounds white.
That's a good example of new racism. It's not just people being sensitive, it's actually real.
Right. So, when people say racism isn't really a thing anymore, I wonder based on what? The evidence and people's experiences show the opposite. So, the main point of the article is that new racism is subtle and it continues because people deny it and they insist that race shouldn't matter. This attitude lets discrimination continue quietly.
Yeah, people can say they're not racist, but if they deny race, they are actually supporting racism.
Yeah, exactly. It made me think about myself too. I grew up believing that not seeing color was right, but now I see that can actually make it harder to fight racism. So instead of saying, I don't see race, we should try saying, I do see race, and I want to understand how racism affects people. I don't want to ignore it.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think that a part of adult education too. Realizing good intentions don't automatically mean a good impact. Being nice isn't the same as being effective. It's kind of like in physio. If you ignore the root cause of the pain, you only treat the symptoms, and the pain will keep coming back. This is
Mhm.
very similar. If we ignore racism, it keeps getting the same results, and we always wonder why nothing's changing.
Wow, that's such a perfect comparison.
And I don't think most people who say, I don't see race, are actually trying to be harmful. I think they really want to be good people, but the article is pushing us to get out of that comfort zone so we can think a little more critically.
Okay, so the biggest question I have is how can we help people move past this zero-sum thinking? As long as people believe that fairness means someone else loses, it's really hard to make progress.
I'm really wondering, how do we help people move from I'm not racist to I'm willing to notice racism and take action without them shutting down or becoming defensive? Because I feel like that's where social change gets kind of stuck.
And according to the article, the first step is to have honest conversations that focus on understanding, not winning. And that's how change begins.
Perfect.
Stop recording. Okay.